He has $22 million. Patricia's scream cut through the silence of the family gathering like a knife. Every eye in the room turned to me. Edward, the simple retired school cook who had spent decades serving food trays and wiping tables. His eyes shone with a mix of shock and greed that chilled my blood. My phone trembled in my wrinkled hands, the screen still showing my bank account balance that Patricia had seen by accident. "It's not possible," my brother Frank muttered, moving closer like a vulture. "Edward, is that true?" The smell of the casseroles I had prepared with so much love turned bitter in the air. My heart was beating so hard, I thought everyone could hear it. For years, they had treated me like the poor relative, the one who cooked in silence while they talked about their successes. They never imagined that beneath my simple shirts and worn-out shoes, I was hiding a fortune I had built penny by penny. "Dad," my son, Brian's voice sounded different. "Dad, where did so much money come from?" My hands trembled as I put the phone away in the pocket of my faded apron. The stares of my entire family pierced me like daggers. Patricia kept pointing at me, her face transformed by greed. My granddaughter, Abigail, looked at me as if I were a stranger. Amy, Frank's wife, whispered something in her husband's ear, her eyes shining with excitement. "Answer, Edward," Frank insisted, his voice filled with an authority he had never used with me before. "If you have that amount, we deserve to know. We are your family." But just an hour ago, when I arrived carrying trays of food, no one even glanced at me. When I served the lunch I had been preparing since 5 inches the morning, no one thanked me. When Brian introduced his new secretary as the most important person in his company, no one noticed how I shrank in my chair. I was invisible to them all, useful only for cooking and cleaning. The silence became deafening. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the distant murmur of children playing in the yard, the creak of chairs as my family settled in to hear my explanation. But I had no desire to explain anything, not after decades of being treated like a domestic servant by my own family. "Spit it out." Patricia raised her voice, losing all composure. "How does a school cook have so much money? Did you steal it?" That accusation was like a slap in the face. My eyes filled with tears, but not of sadness. It was pure rage coursing through my veins. I had worked honestly my whole life. I had saved every dollar, intelligently invested the little I earned. I had lived with the bare minimum to build something greater. But to them, I could only be a thief. "I didn't steal anything," I murmured, my voice barely audible. "Then explain." Brian crossed his arms as if he were interrogating an employee. "It doesn't make sense. A school cook can't have that much money." His words hurt me more than all the others combined. My own son reduced me to my job, as if it was the only thing that defined my worth as a person, as if 40 years of sacrifice, of intelligence, of making the right decisions counted for nothing. The dining room had turned into a courtroom. Everyone was waiting for my confession, my justification, my submission. They wanted me to explain how I had dared to have more money than them without their permission. They wanted me to apologize for being smarter than they thought. But I was no longer the same Edward who had walked in that morning with his hands full of food and his heart full of hope. "You want to know where the money came from?" I finally said, my voice firmer than it had sounded in years. "Well, I'm going to tell you." I sat in the chair that was always mine, the one furthest from the head of the table, the one with its back to the window. For decades, I had taken that seat without complaining, as if it were natural for me to be in the most uncomfortable corner. I worked at the school for 40 years. 40 years of getting up at 4 inches the morning to prepare breakfast for 500 children, while you all slept comfortably. I was already peeling potatoes and washing pots. Patricia snorted with contempt. "That doesn't explain $22 million, Edward. Stop being so dramatic." Her condescending tone reminded me of all the times she had minimized my efforts. When I told her I'd earned my high school diploma at 50, she laughed and said it was cute that an old man was playing at being a student. When I mentioned I had started investing my money, she patted my head like I was a silly little boy. Every dollar I earned, I saved, I continued, ignoring her mockery. While you spent money on expensive restaurants and vacations, I ate beans and rice. While you changed cars every year, I walked in the rain to save bus fare. That still doesn't explain so much money, Brian insisted, tapping his fingers on the table impatiently. Dad, we need the whole truth. The whole truth? As if I owed them an explanation for every decision in my life. As if my money was automatically theirs by blood right. I invested, I said simply. I bought stocks when no one wanted them. I acquired properties in neighborhoods that later became valuable. I studied the market while you all watched television. Frank laughed sarcastically. You, investing in the stock market? Edward, please, you're a school cook. There it was again, school cook. As if those two words defined my entire potential, all my intelligence, all my worth as a human being. As if honest work made me incapable of understanding numbers or making smart decisions. And I also received an inheritance, I added, feeling their eyes light up with renewed greed. Mr. Evans, the owner of the school where I worked, left me part of his fortune. When he died, he left money to you? Amy couldn't hide her shock. Why would he do that? Because for 20 years, I brought him meals at home when he was sick. Because I stayed with him in his final days when his own family abandoned him. Because I was the only person who treated him with dignity when he could no longer care for himself. The silence that followed was different. Now I could see the wheels turning in their heads, calculating, planning, justifying what they were about to ask. Brian cleared his throat. Dad, we understand you worked hard, but you have to admit that this money belongs to us too. We're your family. Exactly. Patricia leaned forward, her voice taking on a syrupy tone that didn't fool me. Edward, you've already lived your life. We have children to educate, bills to pay, dreams to fulfill. It would be selfish of you to keep it all. Selfish, that word pierced me like a spear. Me, who had sacrificed my own dreams to help them. Me, who had worked to the bone to never be a burden. Me, who had lived in self-imposed poverty to build something better. She's right. Dad needs to live comfortably. Brian continued with false consideration. But he doesn't need 22 million. 2 million would be perfect for you. The rest should be divided among the family. Abigail nodded vigorously. Grandpa, think about my college education, about your grandchildren's future. They all started talking at once, laying out their needs, their plans, their dreams financed with my money. Frank mentioned his business debts. Amy talked about the house she had always wanted. Patricia described the family vacations we could all take together with our money. I watched them all with a terrible clarity. For decades, I had wondered why I felt so alone at family gatherings, why their hugs felt empty, why their visits were so sporadic. Now I understood. I had never been part of the family. I had been the free domestic help, the one who cooked without complaint and disappeared when his work was done. But now that I had something they wanted, suddenly I was important. Suddenly, my years of sacrifice had value not for what I had accomplished, but for what they could get from me. So, I said slowly, you all think you deserve my money. It's not your money, Frank corrected firmly. It's family money. You don't need all of it. In that moment, something inside me broke forever. Family money. I repeated his words slowly, savoring the irony. You know what's family. That, when I had my gallbladder surgery 3 years ago, none of you showed up at the hospital. Family is celebrating my birthdays by sending me a text message. Family is inviting me to your events, only so I'll cook for free. Patricia huffed impatiently. Edward, don't be dramatic. We're talking about serious money here. You're right. I stood up from my chair, feeling my legs tremble, not from fear, but from a fury I had been holding back for decades. Let's talk about serious money. Remember when Brian lost his job 5 years ago? Who lent him money for the household expenses? Brian looked down. Dad, that's different. Different? My voice rose higher than I intended. Is it different when you need help? Remember when Frank needed the down payment for his business? Who gave it to him without asking for interest or collateral? Frank shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That was a loan, Edward. We paid you back. You paid me back half, I corrected. My memory was perfect for the money I had worked so hard to save. And when I reminded you about the rest, you told me not to be stingy, that it was family money. The dining room had become tense. I could see them avoiding my gaze, searching for excuses in their minds. But I was just getting started. And when Abigail needed money for her language course, or when Patricia wanted to remodel her kitchen, or when Amy needed to pay off her credit card debts, my voice gained strength with each memory. I was always the school cook when you needed to borrow money. But now that you know how much I have, suddenly I'm family. That's enough, Edward. Frank slammed his fist on the table. You're talking nonsense. We've always loved you. You've loved me. I laughed without humor. When was the last time any of you asked me how I was feeling? When was the last time you invited me to do something that didn't involve cooking for you? Patricia crossed her arms with an annoyed expression. Don't be dramatic. We always include you in everything. You include me to work, I retorted. To serve, to clean, to cook. But when you sit down to talk after dinner, when you plan your vacations, when you celebrate your successes, I'm left in the kitchen washing dishes. Brian tried to soften his tone. Dad, we understand you feel bad, but that doesn't change the fact that you have more money than you need. We are your family. You should share it. Share it. The word came out like I was spitting. Sharing means giving and receiving. I have given my entire life. What have I received in return? You have us, Abigail said with a smile she probably thought was charming. We are your family, Grandpa. That's worth more than money. That sentence was the final blow. The same granddaughter who hadn't visited me in 6 months, who didn't answer my calls, who was ashamed to say her grandfather was a school cook, was now talking to me about the value of family. You know what family is worth? I asked, feeling something fundamental shatter in my chest. Nothing. It's worth nothing when it only shows up when there's money involved. I headed for the kitchen, but Brian blocked my path. Dad, don't go. We need to resolve this as a family. Get out of my way, I told him with a coldness I didn't recognize in my own voice. You're not leaving until we decide what to do with the money. Patricia stood up too, with a defiant attitude. That money belongs to us as much as it does to you. Something inside me exploded. All the humiliation, all the slights, all the times they had made me feel invisible, turned into a pure rage that ran from my feet to my head. I took the plate of casseroles that had taken me so much love to prepare and smashed it on the floor. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the house like a liberating scream. There's your family money, I shouted, throwing the salad bowl too. There's your school cook. Everyone backed away, frightened by my outburst. For 67 years, I had been the silent man, the one who endured everything with a smile. They had never seen me like this. Edward, have you gone crazy? Amy shouted, grabbing onto Frank's arm. Crazy. I laughed as I continued to throw things. Crazy for having wasted 40 years of my life trying to earn a love that never existed. Dad, control yourself. Brian tried to hold me, but I broke free with a strength I didn't know I had. Don't touch me. My voice came out like a roar. Don't touch me with those hands that only reach out when they want something. The dining room fell completely silent. Only my ragged breathing and the crunch of glass under my feet could be heard. They all looked at me as if I had lost my mind. Maybe I had, or maybe I had just found it. "You're crazy," Patricia muttered, looking at the broken pieces of glass scattered on the floor. "Completely crazy." Those words were like a bucket of cold water on my fury. Crazy. That's how they saw me when I finally stood up for my dignity. When a man refuses to be walked all over, he's automatically crazy. "Yes," I said with a calmness that surprised even me. "I am crazy. Crazy for having believed that you loved me for something more than what I could give you." I headed to my room, walking over the broken glass, as if it were flower petals. I could hear their whispers behind me, their voices calculating how to handle the crazy man to get what they wanted. "Edward, come back here," Frank ordered in an authoritarian voice. "You can't just leave like this. We need to talk like adults." I stopped in the doorway and turned to look at him. "Like adults? Since when do you treat me like an adult? To you, I've always been the silly uncle, the helpful dad, the useful grandfather." "Don't say that." Brian tried a conciliatory tone. "Dad, you know we love you. You love me," I repeated sarcastically. "Of course you love me like you love an efficient housekeeper, like you love an available bank account." I went into my room and locked the door. For the first time in decades, I put a barrier between my family and me. The sound of the lock clicking was like music to my ears. I sat on my bed, the same single bed I'd had since I was widowed 15 years ago. The same bed where I had cried in silence so many nights, wondering why I felt so alone, surrounded by family. They knocked on the door. "Dad, open up. Don't be childish," Brian said. Childish? Another perfect word. When an older man sets boundaries, he's childish. When he defends what's his, he's dramatic. When he says no, he's crazy. I took out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. Robert, my old friend from work. The only one who had kept in touch with me after we retired. "Edward." His voice sounded surprised. "How are you?" My voice broke when I heard his warm tone, so different from the calculating voices outside. "I need help." "What happened? Are you okay?" I told him everything. The bank account, my family's reaction, their demands, my explosion. Talking to someone who knew me before I was just grandpa or dad reminded me of who I really was. "Edward, you need to get out of there right now. I can't just leave everything." "Yes, you can." His voice was firm but kind. "You need to get out of there. You need to think clearly, away from that pressure." The knocking on the door grew louder. "Edward," Patricia shouted, "don't be ridiculous. Come out so we can talk." "I'm on my way," I told Robert in a low voice. I packed a small suitcase with my basic things. When I opened the closet, I saw my navy blue suit, the one I had bought for Abigail's graduation. They never asked me to sit with the family in the front row. I stayed in the back among the school employees. I put the suit in the suitcase. I didn't know why, but I felt like I would need it. I opened my bedroom window, the one that looked out onto the back garden, the same window I had escaped through as a child when my father came home drunk. Life's ironies. At 67, I was once again escaping through a window to get away from my own family. "Edward, are you in there?" Brian's voice sounded more worried. They had probably noticed the silence. I climbed out the window with my suitcase, my bones protesting, but my heart feeling freer with every step. I walked through the garden to the street where I caught a cab. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. I gave him Robert's address and leaned back in the seat. For the first time in years, no one knew where I was. No one could ask me to cook, to clean, to give money, or to justify myself. The phone started ringing. Brian, then Patricia, then Frank. I turned the phone off. I arrived at Robert's house as it was getting dark. He was waiting for me at the door with a sad but comforting smile. "Come in, Edward. Make yourself at home." Those simple words made me cry. It had been so long since someone had made me feel welcome without expecting anything in return. "Robert," I said as I walked in, "I think I made a very big mistake." "What was that?" "Believing I had a family." He poured me a chamomile tea and sat across from me. "Edward, do you know what the saddest part of your story is? That you have $22 million, but they lost something much more valuable." "What's that?" "You." That night, I slept in Robert's guest room. And for the first time in decades, I slept without waking up worried about what I had to cook the next day, without stressing about whether I had done something wrong, without feeling that constant weight of not being enough. I slept like a free man. I woke up to the sound of birds singing outside the window. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was until the smell of fresh coffee brought me back to reality. Robert was already awake, making breakfast. "Good morning, Edward." He greeted me with a genuine smile. "How did you sleep?" "Like I haven't slept in years," I admitted, surprised at how rested I felt. "Thank you for having me like this." "You don't have to thank me. That's what real friends are for." Real friends. What a strange concept after spending decades confusing a toxic family with genuine love. While we had breakfast, Robert told me he had been following my investments ever since I mentioned I had started buying stocks. "I always knew you were smarter than your family thought," he said. "You're a brilliant man, Edward. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise." The phone I had turned off the night before was still vibrating on the table. 43 missed calls, 20 WhatsApp messages. "Are you going to answer?" Robert asked. "I suppose I have to face this." I turned on the phone, and the messages started pouring in one after another. First from Brian. "Dad, we're worried." "Where are you? Come home so we can talk calmly." Then, from Patricia. "Edward, don't be dramatic. We know you're upset. But running away doesn't solve anything. Let's think of a solution that benefits everyone." Frank was more direct. "Edward, this is ridiculous. You're an old man. You can't be out there alone. Come back immediately." They all talked about my return, about solutions, about mutual benefits. None of them apologized. None of them admitted they were wrong. To them, I was the one acting irrationally. "You know what's most revealing about these messages?" I asked Robert after reading them to him. "Not a single one says we're sorry or we were wrong. They just want me to come back so they can keep negotiating for my money." Robert nodded wisely. People's true nature comes out when money is involved. The phone rang. It was Brian again. This time I decided to answer. "Dad, thank God. We were so worried. Where are you?" "I'm fine, Brian." "Dad, you have to come back." Patricia didn't sleep all night. She was so worried. I laughed without humor. Was Patricia worried about me or about the 22 million? "Dad, don't say that. We're all worried about you. You're our family." "I wasn't your family yesterday, Brian. Yesterday I was your cook. Today, now that you know I have money, I'm magically family again." "It's not like that, Dad. You're getting carried away by your emotions." There it was again. My emotion was the problem, not their greed. My reaction was exaggerated, not their betrayal. "Brian," I said with all the calm I could muster, "do you remember the last time you called me just to ask how I was? Do you remember the last time you visited without needing something?" Silence on the other end of the line. "You can't remember, can you?" I continued. "Because it hasn't happened. You only look for me when you need me to cook for your gatherings, when you need to borrow money, or when you want me to babysit the kids for free. Dad, that's not fair." "Not fair?" "You know what's not fair, Brian. That your own father has to escape through a window to feel free in his own family." "You escaped through the window?" His voice sounded genuinely surprised. Like a teenager. Because you made me feel like a prisoner in my own home. There was another long silence. Then I heard voices in the background. Patricia was talking to him, telling him what to say. "Dad." Brian's voice changed. It became more calculated. "We understand you're upset, but think about it rationally. You're 67 years old. That money should be secured for your old age and then distributed among the family. It's the logical way to handle it." "The logical way," I repeated. "And who decides what's logical?" "You. We're your family, Dad. We have a right to have a say in such important decisions." "A right?" My voice rose. "What right do you have to the money that I earned, that I saved, that I invested intelligently?" Patricia took the phone. "Edward, stop being so dramatic. Come home, and let's talk like civilized adults." "Civilized adults?" "Like when you screamed, 'He has $22 million' in front of the whole family? Like when you accused me of stealing? Is that your idea of being civilized?" I was surprised. It's natural that I reacted that way. What would have been natural is to be happy for me. What would have been natural is to say, "It's great that you were able to save so much." But the first thing you thought about was how to get a piece of that money. That's not true. Of course it's true, Patricia, and you know it. I hung up the phone and turned it off again. Robert watched me with a mix of pride and concern. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free." I answered without hesitation. For the first time in decades, I feel completely free. Over the next 3 days, my phone never stopped ringing. Each call was a different attempt at manipulation, each message a new strategy to make me feel guilty. Brian alternated between fake concern and veiled threats. Patricia oscillated between emotional blackmail and direct insults. Frank had opted for patriarchal authority, reminding me that I was just an old man and needed guidance to manage so much money. But the message that hurt the most came on the 4th day. It was from Abigail, my granddaughter. "Grandpa, I'm so sad. Mom says you've become selfish and don't love us anymore. She says you prefer money over your family. Is that true? I love you very much, but I don't understand why you don't want to help us. Am I not your favorite granddaughter anymore?" Those words broke my heart. They were using an innocent 4-year-old girl to manipulate me, filling her head with lies about my supposed wickedness. "Robert," I said with tears in my eyes, "they're poisoning my granddaughter against me." "It's what manipulators do," he replied sadly. "They use the most vulnerable as emotional weapons." That afternoon, I decided to answer Abigail, but not by phone. I went to her school and waited for her outside. When she saw me, she ran towards me with a smile that quickly faded. "Grandpa, Mom says I'm not supposed to talk to you." "And what do you think?" I asked, sitting on a bench in the nearby park. "Do you think your grandpa has turned into a bad person?" Abigail looked at me with those intelligent eyes she had inherited from her great-grandfather. "I don't know, Grandpa. Mom says you have a lot of money and you don't want to share it with us. She says that's wrong." "Do you remember your 12th birthday?" I asked her. "Do you remember what you liked the most?" "The cake you made me," she answered without hesitation. It was chocolate with strawberries and had my name written in blue frosting. "Do you remember how long it took me to make it?" "All day. You came super early and stayed until after the party to clean everything up. And do you remember who else helped prepare your party?" Abigail frowned, thinking. "Nobody. Just you, Grandpa." "Exactly. Just me. While your mom was at the hair salon, I decorated the whole house. While your dad was watching football, I prepared all the food. While your aunts and uncles arrived just in time to eat, I had been working since 6:00 the morning." "I hadn't thought about that," Abigail murmured. "Now, tell me, do you think a grandfather who does that for you doesn't love you? Do you think someone who has worked his whole life to have something to leave his family is selfish?" Abigail's eyes filled with tears. "No, Grandpa. You've always been good to me. Then don't let others think for you, my love. Use your own head, your own heart." I hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her chamomile shampoo, engraving that moment in my memory because I had a feeling it would be the last for a long time. When I got back to Robert's house, I found Brian waiting for me at the door. "Dad, we need to talk. You followed your daughter. I had to make sure you weren't telling her strange things. Strange things like the truth." Brian sighed with exasperation. "Dad, this has gotten out of control." Patricia consulted a lawyer. I felt a chill run down my spine. "A lawyer?" "She says you're showing signs of mental decline. That your erratic behavior these last few days is evidence that you're not fit to manage so much money." I couldn't breathe for a moment. Mental decline. For defending myself against their abuse. For refusing to hand over my money without a fight. "Dad." Brian continued in a tone that was meant to be gentle but sounded threatening. "We don't want to go there. We'd rather solve this as a family. But if you continue to be unreasonable, we'll have to take legal action to protect you from yourself." "Protect me from myself?" "From the mental decline you're obviously suffering from. A man my age, who runs away through windows, who breaks dishes, who abandons his family. That's not normal, Dad." There it was, the masterstroke. To turn my awakening into madness, to transform my liberation into mental illness, to use my age as a weapon against me. "Brian," I said with a calm I didn't feel, "get out of here right now." "Dad," I said, "get out now. You can't run away forever. If you don't come back voluntarily, we'll have to act." After he left, I sat with Robert to analyze the situation. He, who had worked as an accountant for 30 years, understood perfectly what was happening. "Edward, you need legal protection immediately. Do you think they can take my money from me? They can try, and with a shrewd lawyer and your age against you, they might succeed. You need to secure your assets before it's too late." That night, for the first time in my life, I couldn't sleep for reasons that weren't someone else's worries. This time, finally, I was worried about myself. The next morning, Robert accompanied me to the office of Arthur Miller, the best family estate lawyer in the city. He was a man in his 50s with intelligent eyes and a direct way of speaking that immediately gave me confidence. "Mr. Edward," he said after listening to my entire story, "what your family is trying to do has a name. Elder financial abuse. It's more common than you think, especially when there are considerable assets involved." "Can they really declare me mentally incompetent?" I asked, feeling a knot in my stomach. "They can try, but it would be very difficult for them to succeed. You demonstrate perfect lucidity. You've been managing your finances intelligently for years, and your decision to protect your assets is completely rational." He leaned forward. "But we need to act quickly to shield your assets." Over the next 3 hours, I signed documents that protected my money from any attempt at usurpation. We created an irrevocable trust. I updated my will with very specific clauses and established clear legal powers in case I ever really needed help in the future. "And what if they show up with a court order?" I asked. "Let them come." Arthur smiled. "Everything is perfectly documented. Your money is legally and irrevocably protected." When we left the office, I felt as if I had put on invisible armor. For the first time in days, I could breathe easy, but the peace was short-lived. That afternoon, Patricia showed up at Robert's house, accompanied by 2 police officers. "Mr. Edward," one of the officers said, "your daughter-in-law filed a missing person report. She says you are being manipulated by this gentleman." I looked at Patricia with a mixture of contempt and pity. "Officers, as you can see, I am perfectly fine. I am not missing, nor am I being manipulated. Edward." Patricia tried her sweetest voice. "We're all worried about you. You've been acting very strange. This man," she pointed at Robert with disdain, "is obviously taking advantage of your mental confusion." "Mental confusion?" I laughed openly. "Is it mental confusion to refuse to give you my money?" The police officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. It was obvious they had realized this wasn't a missing person case, but a family drama over money. "Sir," the younger one said to me, "are you here of your own free will?" "Completely. And I have full mental capacity to make my own decisions." "But Edward," Patricia insisted, "you have to understand that we're worried. Leaving your house like that, breaking things, leaving without a word, that's not normal for you." "You know what's not normal," I said to the officers, ignoring Patricia. "For a family to demand that a 6-7-year-old man hand over his life savings simply because they're his relatives." Patricia turned red with embarrassment. "Edward, don't tell them lies. They're not lies." I took out my phone and showed them the messages. "Here is all the proof of how my family has been pressuring me to give them my money." The officers read the messages with increasingly serious expressions, the veiled threats, the emotional blackmail, the attempts to declare me mentally incompetent. It was all documented. "Mrs. Patricia," the senior officer said, "this appears to be a civil matter, not a criminal one. Mr. Edward is clearly of sound mind and has the right to dispose of his money as he sees fit." After they left, Patricia stood in the doorway, her fists clenched and an expression of pure hatred on her face. "This isn't over, Edward," she said with a venomous voice. "You will regret choosing money over your family." "Patricia," I replied with a surprising calm, "I didn't choose money over family. You all chose money over me. You're a bitter, selfish old man." "Maybe so, but I'm a bitter, selfish old man with $22 million that you will never touch." Patricia left, slamming the door so hard it shook the whole house. That night, Robert and I had dinner in silence. After a while, he broke the silence. "Do you regret anything?" I thought about it for a moment. "I regret taking so long to open my eyes. I regret wasting so many years trying to earn a love that was never real." "And the money? Do you regret denying it to them?" "Not at all," I replied without hesitation. "That money represents 40 years of honest work, of sacrifices, of smart decisions. I'm not going to give it away to people who despise me." "What are you going to do now?" I smiled for the first time in days, something I should have done a long time ago. "What's that?" "Live for myself." That night, before going to sleep, I wrote a letter that I knew would change everything forever. A letter that would definitively close one chapter of my life and open a completely new one. A letter my family never saw coming. The letter I wrote that night was to the director of the St. Michael's Educational Foundation, an organization that helped children from low-income families continue their studies. I had followed their work for years, silently admiring their efforts from my small world as a school cook. "Dear Director," I wrote in my careful handwriting, "my name is Edward Vasquez. I am a retired cook, and I wish to make a significant donation to your foundation." As I wrote, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in decades. For the first time, my money would have a purpose that filled me with pride instead of shame. 2 days later, Brian showed up at Robert's house with a new strategy. This time, he was accompanied by Frank and a man who introduced himself as a family mediator. "Dad," Brian said with a forced smile, "we brought Mr. Vargas to help us find a solution that benefits everyone." This Vargas was a thin man with the expression of a hungry shark. "Mr. Edward," he said, "I understand there have been some family misunderstandings. I'm here to facilitate an equitable agreement." "Equitable for whom?" I asked directly. "For the entire family," he replied with an oily smile. "We have prepared a very reasonable proposal. You would keep $5 million for your personal expenses, and the remaining 17 would be distributed among your direct heirs." and I laughed in his face. Direct heirs? Am I dead? Frank shifted uncomfortably. Edward, don't be dramatic. It's a fair proposal. Fair. My voice rose. Is it fair that you decide how I should spend the money I earned with my own effort? Dad. Brian tried a paternal tone. $5 million is more than enough for a man your age. What are you going to do with so much money? Take it to the grave? Maybe, I answered dryly. Or maybe I'll donate it all to charity. It's my money. I'll do whatever I want with it. The mediator cleared his throat. Mr. Edward, you must understand that the family has legitimate rights. Your erratic behavior in recent days suggests that you may not be making the best decisions. Erratic? Robert spoke for the first time. Does it seem erratic to you that a man defends himself from the financial abuse of his own family? You have no say in this matter, Frank snapped at him. This is a family problem. Robert has more right to an opinion than you do, I told him coldly. He has been more of a family to me these past few days than you have in years. Dad, that's enough. Brian lost his patience. If you don't accept this reasonable proposal, we will have to take more drastic measures. Like what? Proving that I am not capable of managing my own estate? The mediator smiled as if he had just won a point. Mr. Edward, a judge could determine that a man of your age, who abandons his family, destroys property, and refuses, family mediation might not be in a position to manage such a considerable fortune. I felt a wave of heat wash over me. This man was threatening me to my face, using my age as a weapon against me. You know what? I stood up from my chair with all the dignity I could muster. You can all go to hell. Edward, Frank shouted, scandalized. To hell, I repeated louder. You, your mediator, and your threats. My money, my decisions. Dad, you're making a mistake you're going to regret, Brian said in a sinister voice. The only mistake I regret is taking so long to realize who you all really are. After they left, Robert hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, Edward. You know what, Robert? For the first time in my life, I'm proud of myself, too. The next day, I called the director of the street, Michael's Educational Foundation, and made an appointment. Mr. Ramirez was an older man with kind eyes and hard-working hands that reminded me of my late father. Mr. Edward, he said after I explained my situation, are you sure about this decision? It's a considerable sum. Completely sure. For 40 years, I fed the bodies of hundreds of children. Now, I want to feed their minds and their dreams. And your family? My family proved that they only care about me when money is involved. These children matter to me because they have something my family lost a long time ago. What is that? Hope. Innocence. The ability to be grateful for what they receive, instead of demanding what they think they deserve. We signed the papers that same afternoon. $20 million. Designated for educational scholarships, school construction, and school lunch programs. I kept $2 million for my personal expenses and my own plans. When I left that office, I felt as if I had been born again. My money would finally have the purpose it was always meant to have, to change lives for the better. That night, I called Brian to give him the news. You did what? He screamed when I told him about the donation. I donated $20 million to the education of children in need. You're completely insane. That money was ours. No, I told him with absolute calm. It was never yours. And now it never will be. The family scandal that followed my donation was epic. Patricia showed up at my old house with a moving truck, thinking I still lived there, and screamed for a full hour in front of the empty windows, insulting me and threatening me with lawsuits she could never win. The neighbors called the police. Brian tried to legally challenge the donation, but Arthur had done his job perfectly. All the documents were in order. All the psychological evaluations he had requested proved my full mental capacity, and the donation was completely irrevocable. Frank went so far as to appear on the local news, claiming that I had been manipulated by unscrupulous people into giving away the family fortune. The interview was so ridiculous that it went viral on social media, where people mocked a man publicly demanding his living father's inheritance. But none of that affected me anymore, because, for the first time in my life, I was truly living. With the $2 million I kept, I bought a small beachfront apartment in a coastal town 3 hours from the city. From my window, I could watch the sunrise every day, something I never had time to enjoy when I was living to please others. Robert moved into a nearby apartment, and we became adventure buddies. Together, we traveled to places I had always dreamed of seeing but had never dared to visit. Paris, where I finally tasted authentic macarons after years of making cheap versions for family parties. Rome, where I walked through ancient streets, feeling freer than ever. Machu Picchu, where I cried with emotion, realizing that at 67, I was living the life I had always wanted. I documented every trip on a blog I created. It's never too late to start. The stories of my family awakening and my new life began to inspire other older men who felt invisible in their own families. Edward, a 70-year-old man from Colombia, wrote to me, "Your story gave me the courage to stand up to my children after years of being their servant. Thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to choose yourself." Hundreds of similar messages arrived every week. Men who had spent decades being the invisible providers, the ones who worked without thanks, who gave without receiving, who sacrificed themselves until they disappeared. My story had shown them that they could say no, that they could set boundaries, that they could live for themselves. The St. Michael's Educational Foundation invited me to be on their board of directors. For the first time in my life, my opinion was valued. My ideas were heard. My experience was respected. I helped design school feeding programs based on my 40 years of experience. And every school we built, with my donation, had a plaque that read, "Donated by someone who believed in the power of education." A year after my escape through the window, I received an unexpected call. It was Abigail, my granddaughter, now 15. "Grandpa," she said in a shaky voice, "I ran away from home. Can I stay with you?" "What happened, my love?" "My parents are getting divorced, and they fight all the time about money. Mom says it's all your fault, that your selfishness destroyed the family. But I remembered what you told me in the park. I used my own head, and I realized they're the selfish ones, not you." That afternoon, Abigail arrived at my apartment with a small suitcase and a nervous smile. I made her favorite meal while she told me how the family war had escalated until it became unbearable. "Grandpa," she said as we had dinner facing the sea, "is it true you donated almost all your money?" "It's true. Do you regret it?" "Not at all. That money is building schools, educating children, feeding dreams. It couldn't be better invested. But what about us? What about my college?" "My love," I said, taking her young hands, "I'm not going to pay for your college. You are going to earn it with your effort, with your intelligence, with your hard work. And when you do, you will value it 1,000 times more than if it had been handed to you." Abigail nodded thoughtfully. "Like you did with your money." "Exactly like I did with my money." Today, 3 years later, Abigail is studying on a full scholarship she earned on her own merit while working part-time at the foundation, helping me with the educational programs. She has become the daughter I never had, the company I always sought, the family I finally deserved. Brian and Patricia divorced, fighting over debts, not inheritances. Frank's business went bankrupt, and he had to sell his house. Amy sent me a message last year, apologizing and subtly suggesting that perhaps we could talk. I never replied. This morning, as I write the last chapter of my book, It's Never Too Late to Start, which will be published next month, I can hear Abigail making breakfast in the kitchen. It smells of fresh coffee and freedom. At 70, I finally learned the most important lesson of my life. True love never comes with bills attached. The people who truly love you celebrate your triumphs instead of calculating how to benefit from them. My family thought that by taking away their fake love, they were punishing me. They didn't know they were setting me free. Now, every sunrise from my window facing the sea reminds me of something fundamental. It's never too late to choose the life you deserve, to say no to those who hurt you, and to discover that true family doesn't always share your blood, but your values. And that is the story of how a simple school cook became the freest man in the world. 5 years have passed since that family gathering that changed my life forever. Today, as I write these lines from the terrace of my house in Tuscany, Italy, where I've come to spend the summer, I can say with absolute certainty that the bravest decision I made in my 72 years was to escape through that window. The street, Michael's Educational Foundation, has become the most important educational organization in the region. With my initial donation, we built 17 schools, awarded more than 2,000 college scholarships, and created a school lunch program that benefits 15,000 children daily. Every time I visit one of my schools and see the bright faces of the children who now have access to a quality education, I feel that my money found its true destiny. My book, translated into 8 languages, has sold over 500,000 copies and has become a manual of liberation for older men around the world. The letters I receive daily confirm that my story was not unique. Thousands of men live in similar situations, feeling that their value is measured only by what they can give to others. Dear Edward, a reader from Spain wrote to me, "After reading your book at 65, I stood up to my family who had taken me for granted for 40 years. Today, I live alone, happy, and for the first time in my life, no one demands I provide for them while ignoring my own needs. Thank you for teaching me that respect is not begged, for it is demanded." Abigail, now 18, graduated with honors from high school and is studying business administration on a full scholarship at the most prestigious university in the country. On weekends, she comes to visit me, and we work together on the foundation's projects. She has grown into a confident, independent young woman who understands the value of honest work and personal dignity. She is living proof that breaking toxic family circles can save the next generations. "Grandpa," she told me last month, "I used to think you were mean for not giving my parents money. Now I understand that you were the smartest of them all. You taught me that true love is not bought or sold." Robert and I became closer friends, and 2 years ago, we decided to share a home in a small ceremony by the sea, accompanied only by Abigail and a few friends from the foundation. At 70, I experienced for the first time what it means to have a friend who loves me for who I am, not for what I can give him. Our days are spent traveling, reading, walking on the beach, and working together on educational projects. It is the quiet, full life I always dreamed of, but never thought I deserved. The fate of my former family followed the course that was already foreseeable. Brian and Patricia ended up in a fierce legal war over custody and assets. Patricia, obsessed with proving that I was mentally unfit to donate my money, spent a fortune on lawyers who achieved nothing because the donation was legally ironclad. Brian lost his job due to stress and constant absences for legal appointments related to my case. They both ended up in debt and bitter, blaming me for all their problems. Frank and Amy sold their house to pay off the debts of the failed business. They tried to contact me several times with messages that alternated between threats and pleas. The last message I received from Amy said, "Edward, we are family. You have to help us in this difficult time. You can't be so cruel." I deleted it without responding, as I have with all their attempts at manipulation. The greatest irony is that if they had continued to treat me with basic respect, if they had continued to see me as the silent, compliant cook, they probably would have inherited all my money when I died. Their own greed and contempt deprived them of the fortune they so desperately wanted. The TV show Life Stories invited me last year to tell my experience. During the interview, the host asked me if I ever considered forgiving my family and redistributing some of the money. "Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing them to keep hurting you," I replied. "I forgave them in my heart to release my own bitterness, but that doesn't mean I'm going to finance their irresponsibility and lack of respect. Forgiveness and stupidity are very different things." The interview went viral on the internet, generating thousands of supportive comments from men who identified with my story. Many shared their own experiences of family financial abuse, creating a wave of awareness about this rarely discussed topic. Today, when I reflect on that 6-7-year-old man who trembled while his relatives humiliated him, demanding his money, I feel a mixture of compassion and pride. Compassion for all the years he lost, trying to earn a love that was never real, and pride for having had the courage to say enough when he still had time to rewrite his story. My story has become a beacon for men who feel trapped in toxic family relationships, especially those who, like me, were raised to believe that unlimited personal sacrifice was synonymous with masculine duty. Through my lectures, my book, and my foundation, I have been able to transform my pain into purpose, my humiliation into strength. The deepest lesson I have learned is that it is never too late to reclaim your own life. It doesn't matter how many years you have invested in relationships that empty you. It doesn't matter how many times they have made you believe you don't deserve respect. It doesn't matter how comfortable your discomfort has become. There is always time to choose dignity over compliance, self-respect over the approval of others. This morning, while Robert was making coffee and Abigail was showing me her university grades via video call, I realized something beautiful. For the first time in my life, I am surrounded by people who love me unconditionally, who celebrate my successes without calculating personal benefits, who respect me without me having to beg for it. To the men who read this story and see themselves in it, I say, your value is not measured by what you can give to others, but by the dignity with which you treat yourselves. True love never comes with invoices, threats, or emotional blackmail. And remember, it's never too late to start living the life you truly deserve.